Hello and welcome back to Seagulls Central with me, Adam MacDonald. Thank you so much for tuning into the channel again. And if you're listening on audio, thank you so much for putting the podcast on and having a listen or having a watch today. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being back for another episode. It's been a while. I'm not being great at uploading at the moment. I'm aware that this was something that I'd sort of try to do as an every game kind of thing and a more reaction series. But I think, one, life gets in the way, Christmas period, everything, work. But also, I think I prefer, if I even, which I did plan to do, come back a lot more regularly, do videos much more regularly. I want to try and do it more maybe around kind of think pieces and maybe taking stock at where we are as a club as opposed to maybe one-off reactionary vids to matches. I don't know what you think. I'd love to know your views in the comments and kind of what you would like best from my show here, my channel, these episodes. What kind of do you because I feel like there's a lot of stuff out there at the moment where it is just kind of match preview, match reaction. I kind of want to maybe offer something a little bit different to that. Admittedly not massively different. But I'd love to know your views. But I hope you've been well. I hope you had a lovely Christmas and a fantastic kind of New Year celebration period, and you're back into the swing of things. It's that weird period now. First couple of weeks of January is a bit rough. Back to work, back to the reality of life. So I hope you're having a good 2025 so far and are able to go into it with a bit of new impetus. And I think Brighton will probably be hoping to do that as well, given the kind of last month, 6 weeks, 8 weeks that Brighton have had. You think probably really back to late November was probably the last time kind of we looked in good nick in terms of getting results and stuff. Obviously, we had a good result in the last game against Arsenal, I suppose, a 1-1 draw, one where we probably could have maybe on another day got an even better result. But yeah, really since that Bournemouth game, I think at the end of November, it's been tough for Brighton, and I think a lot of questions have been raised during the last kind of month or so. A lot of problems have been have risen to the fore, I think, in terms of maybe selection issues and tactical mistakes, perhaps we can say, from players, from I was going to say from fans. I don't think fans are bringing tactical mistakes, from the manager, and of course from the fan base. I think a lot of the fans have we've all reacted differently to kind of the last month or so, and it's created a lot of debate and lots of people calling for different things. I think at the moment amongst the Brighton community, you're seeing some people calling for Fabian Hürzeler's head. I was going to say not literally, obviously not literally. Others saying that he needs time, others blaming it more on the players, looking at people like João Pedro, some people are doing. So there is a real mix in terms of where the fan base is at the moment, and that would be another thing I'd be intrigued to know, is kind of where you sit on it, because I see a lot of different stuff on Twitter, particularly a lot of what I think is quite reactionary stuff around kind of after results and stuff that's quite negative, but I'd like to kind of get a gauge of what the views of this channel kind of think, because all the comments I see under these videos and the ones that I engage with, and you'll see I try to respond to everyone who does comment on here, but people generally seem to be fairly optimistic and kind of wanting to give the manager at least the kind of benefit of the doubt and a bit of a chance to kind of take things into the future and kind of just try and at least get to the end of the season and take stock. But I'd love to know what you think. Are you kind of feeling positive and negative? If we're looking into the manager specifically, how are your thoughts on that? I know, of course, the appointment of Graham Potter at West Ham, I think, has raised quite a few questions among the Brighton fan base. I think it almost brought a weird one in me when I saw his press conference when he was unveiled as the West Ham manager on Thursday morning. Because it felt a bit weird. It felt like watching, and this sounds really weird, it felt like watching an ex with like another partner. And but the thing I found weird was I didn't really get that at Chelsea. I think I really blocked out the Chelsea thing. I just was so disinterested in him at Chelsea due to all of after him leaving. But I think having seen him a couple of years down the line, now at West Ham, I kind of am thinking to myself, would I want him back at Brighton? And ultimately my answer is probably not. However, I think when you see it, it did just make me think, I wonder what he would be like with this squad. And I wonder how we would be getting on if he was the manager. I think one thing we would be seeing, perhaps, is maybe a little bit more of a clear identity in terms of style of play. And that's going to be one of the things I want to talk about in this video. around Fabian Hürzeler. This video is going to be mainly focused on Fabian Hürzeler and what he needs to do better, what the fans need to understand more about him, what we all need to kind of get to grips with him, and the reality and expectation around him that we need to kind of look at through this season. I think there's been a lot of talk around whether he's ready or not, and I'm going to give my view on that, and I'll try and kind of get into it fully. But I think one of the big things that I think a lot of fans are struggling with, and I'll make no secret of it, I'm struggling with it too. I actually said it in pre-season. I said it on a podcast. I might have said it on this show, actually, even after he was appointed. I couldn't quite understand what his style of play was. Obviously, we'd moved from De Zerbi, who was such an obvious, electric football tactician in terms of his style. And I didn't really understand that. I remember hearing quotes about Hürzeler when he was joining the club. He was saying that he idolises De Zerbi, or he looks up to him, certainly, and his style of play is quite similar to him. I can see glimpses of that, I can see similarities, but I don't think we're seeing someone with such a clear identity. That was something I actually quite liked at the start of the season, was having a manager, who was perhaps a little bit more pragmatic and prepared to change his style dependent on the players he had or dependent on the opposition we were coming up against. Because I felt that was one aspect around Roberto De Zerbi that I found a little bit annoying, was the fact that it felt quite uncompromising the way that he would play. He would play his way all of the time, depending on, and whether that meant we'd get battered every week. I suppose that was the issue that I had with it. And I quite liked the fact that Fabian Hürzeler said when he first joined that, he'd rather win a game 1-0 than win it 5-4, and that's kind of the way I think as well, and that's the kind of football I prefer watching in a weird way. That's why I quite like the Graham Potter years, although I think when De Zerbi came in, you realised there was a character you could get behind in a way that I probably couldn't really get behind in terms of Potter as easily. And I think Fabian, look, I'm prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt. I think at the very least, this fan base should be giving him till the end of the season until they make a decision on him. I think for me, the jury is still out. I'm not going to sit here and defend him to the rafters and say that he is, the second coming. However, I think the idea that some fans are writing him off already and saying, okay, look, he's not as good as De Zerbi. We can all accept that, can't we? I think it's plain to see, at least in my opinion it is, he's not as good as De Zerbi. However, does that mean that he's not a manager who's capable of achieving a top 8 finish with us? Of course he is. Of course he's able to do that for Brighton. And I think he actually will do that for Brighton this season. I know that second to kind of 9th is incredibly compact, 2nd to 10th in terms of teams. There's so many good teams in there that want to finish in Europe, that want to finish in the top 10. But I do think we'll finish somewhere around 8th, which I think with the quality of our squad and the new management and everything that we can kind of put into consideration, I think that's about where we can expect Brighton to be. So I'm prepared to kind of reserve judgment until the end of the season. I think the club will as well. I think the club are taking this year to kind of understand that they did have a very special manager in De Zerbi and that replacing him wasn't going to be easy. I think particularly after the rejection of Kieran McKenna, the club have never addressed, but it was quite apparent that he was the first choice last summer after De Zerbi left for Brighton. And obviously McKenna turned it down. So I think whenever you're appointing a 31-year-old, it would be insane for the Brighton board, the Brighton kind of football directorship, to be making an appointment of a 31-year-old manager who's never managed in the Premier League, let alone any top flight across Europe, and then part ways with him after 8-9 months due to the fact that it's not been a perfect season. And I think you can put injuries into that as well, and you can do so many other things. And I'd actually say this season hasn't been particularly saying it's not been a perfect season. I actually think it's been quite a good season. I think it's been quite a positive season. We've seen some really good results in the first half of the season. Up until really November, I thought we were a really, really good side. And I still think we are. I think we've got some really good players. I think losing players like we have, and I think this is an underrated one, but I think losing players like Jack Hinshelwood, I think losing players like Lewis Dunk, who obviously questions have been asked around him. João Pedro has been out for long periods this season so far. Obviously he's out again now. Kadioglu, there's so many players that we actually haven't seen the best of this season, which I think could have been very crucial. And we saw that they were crucial under Roberto De Zerbi. So I'm prepared to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt until the end of the season. What I do want to see between now and the end of the season is a bit more of an identity in Brighton. And maybe I've been challenging myself recently to kind of wonder whether that's a realistic thing that I should expect. So because in the last 5 years as a Brighton fan, the way we've played has been so clear in terms of its identity. The way we have played has been so obvious. As soon as Graham Potter, even under Chris Hughton, we knew what we were. And we knew what our style was. Potter, De Zerbi coming in, really clear identities. Potter changing the style of football completely, the football club. De Zerbi then keeping it similar, but totally upgrading the level and quality and dynamism of it. I mean, going to someone like Hürzeler, I think I personally am struggling with the fact that I don't quite know what we are. We're a team that seems to bypass the midfield quite a lot. We're a team that isn't quite as focused on kind of... one thing I like is that we get the ball forward a lot. And the thing on De Zerbi, there was a lot of knocking the ball about just for the sake of knocking it about. So I do like that. But I've just got some questions around kind of the way we play. I don't really quite understand what we are. If you said to... It's a bit like the old, not to get political, but it's a bit like the old Keir Starmer thing. Like, no, what's he standing for? I kind of feel like it's the same with Fabian Hürzeler. We know that he's a decent guy and we know that he's a good coach, but I don't quite get what's the story here with him. You know what I mean? Like, what's the style? When I'm sitting down at the Amex or I'm in the away end this season, I'm kind of watching it thinking, I don't quite get what we are as a team here. Are we Moments FC? Are we high quality players FC? As in, we're just relying on the fact that we've actually got a very good squad, probably the best squad in our history. Or is it that we're a very well coached? I'm sure we are a well coached team. You can see that in many elements of our play. But I don't think we're particularly cohesive. I don't know. Do you think I'm being harsh there? I don't know. Maybe I am. But yeah, I think another thing as well that I think is worth mentioning as well with Fabian Hürzeler is around the substitutions he's making. I think there have been a few games this season where he has made the wrong subs. I think, to be fair to him, I thought in the Arsenal game, the most recent Premier League game, I think he made some good decisions. I think bringing on the subs he brought on in that game did change the game. And I think it was after a lot of those subs came on that we were able to get that penalty through João Pedro. But ultimately, we're a side at the moment that aren't really looking like scoring, prolifically at least. And it's kind of reminding us of the Graham Potter years where we were quite nice on the eye, and we still are nice on the eye. We can pop it about nicely, as we always have done for the last 5-6 years. But what are we in terms of, a goal-scoring team? I think we gained so much under De Zerbi in terms of becoming a really fast-paced, high-intensity team. And I feel like we might have lost a bit of that now in terms of the way that we can create chances so far, the way that we can get them behind teams all the time, the way that our players are quite clinical. De Zerbi obviously took players like Solly March, a player who I still struggle with a little bit. I'm looking forward to him coming back. But he took a player in Solly March who wasn't massively clinical. Let's be real about it. Before, under Potter, he was a utility player who was playing at wing-back at times, and he turned Solly March into a goal-scoring winger. And I've not... it feels like we kind of need a bit of that again. We need Mitoma to be getting goals all the time, which he's not doing. We need Minteh. I'm being very harsh. But we just do at the moment look like a team who is struggling to score goals. And can Fabian Hürzeler fix that? Because that's, I think, the big challenge for him. We obviously need to bolster that defence, but we also need to understand how can we become a consistent goal-scoring team. So I guess what I want to kind of flip the coin a little bit and understand what it is that I think Fabian Hürzeler has been doing well and what I'm impressed by. I think absolutely this season, I think, I've been very impressed in the way that he's been able to continue the kind of positive progression that we've seen in the last kind of couple of years. I think it could have been very easy for managers to come in and be overruled by the Premier League, overruled by the players, to be managing players older than him. The whole cliche that we think around Fabian Hürzeler, I think that could have been very challenging, but he's actually, in that sense, taken it to like a duck to water. And for the first half of the season, he looked like a manager who couldn't be touched. You got to remember, he's picking up manager awards left, right, and centre. What I want to see from him is a bit of... I kind of just want to see a moment where something's happening in a game where it's not quite going our way, and he really does something tactically to change it, or he can really liven up the way that we're playing, be that a substitution, a tweak to a tactical formation, doing a job on a team in terms of the lineup we put out and the style we play in. I'd like to see something of that, because I think that's what a lot of us. So under Potter, a lot of us clung to the fact that, after having Chris Hughton, this was a real change in style. It was positive football, ball-playing football. We all got behind that. De Zerbi, he took that ball-playing football and raised it, made it more electric, made it more exciting. Now, what's Hürzeler's thing? What's his shtick? What's his story that he's given us? What's the narrative that as fans you kind of cling on to? The way that, for example, Arsenal fans for a long time defended Arteta despite them not being very good because, they felt like they were on a journey with him. For a long time with Brighton, I feel like we've been on a journey with our managers. We're prepared to kind of stick by them, whether they have their faults or not, because they feel like we're going somewhere and they're taking us in a direction. We've seen a certain level of tactical acumen. We've seen them do this and we understand they're taking us somewhere. I think for me, I want to see something. What is Fabian Hürzeler? What can I cling to as a fan? Is it that brilliant in-game management? Is it ability to shut up shop? Is it an ability to score loads of goals? What is it? And I think that's what I'm waiting for. And I think when fans see that, I think that gives him a bit more leeway with fans. It gives him more time. And I think lots of fans who are getting very frustrated, maybe a manager whose suit looks a bit too big for him, a manager whose, the shoes look a bit, you get what I'm trying to say, the kind of role might look like it's swallowing up a little bit. He's not quite in those bad moments. How is he turning it around? I think we need to see that so then we can go, you know what, this guy's got the chops about him and we can get behind him. And I think, of course, naturally, the way to shut up your haters is to kind of prove it in results and prove it in performances. I think as a fan base, maybe we're still waiting to see that. I think we probably are. So I think in terms of kind of turning it around, I want to focus on maybe what this next month can bring and the way that the January transfer window might provide Brighton with a bit of a boost going into the final stage of the season, because I know this video maybe sounded quite negative and I haven't meant for it to sound like that. But there's a lot of positivity to look forward to. We're still in a kind of top 7 race. We're still in a top 8 race. We can still finish in a good position this season. We're banging it. It's so tight at the moment. If we can turn it around and we can pick up a bit of momentum into the second half of the season, or even just in this couple of months, it puts us in a really good chance to finish in a very respectable position, considering the overhaul in players and the management staff that we had in the summer. And it can push us into next season, and it can give a lot of Brighton fans that hope going into next season. So I think January is going to be big for that. The main areas seem to be, I think we need a centre-back. For me, we need a centre-back, a right-back, and I would realistically be happy with that. I know there are other positions on the pitch that we might need filling. Obviously, at the moment, we're struggling for a striker, blah-de-blah. However, I think for me, in the immediate term, it's about getting that another centre-back in and a right-back. I think the annoying thing about that Vitor Reis transfer that seems to have fallen through due to the fact Albion have been pipped to the post by City, them bidding 40 million or so and Brighton were going in about 25 million, is that he would have been a player who wouldn't have changed our season, wouldn't have shored us up this season, but would have been one that we could have gone into next season and really pinned our hopes to. And you're looking at someone like Lewis Dunk leaves in probably the next 18 months, 2 seasons. It's a player who... It's a player who we could kind of... do you know what I mean? We could go into next season with a bit more confidence that defence might be looking like a Rolls Royce of a defence. And now I don't know whether it means that we're gonna go in and get a player like Buscagli, who obviously will be free in the summer, but at 27 years old would be primed and ready, you'd hope, for the Premier League. Are Brighton gonna... generally in the winter window, they go for young players, they go for future players, they go for academy signings, they go for kind of signings that can be integrated in the summer or the second half of the season and then kick on into the next season. Are we going to have any ready-to-go players, even if it's just one defender? I think it would be really useful just to have one defender that is ready to go into this second half of the season, because it means when our injuries come back, when... because our forward line, I think our forward line is really elite. I've said in the past it's a top 4 level in terms of our attack. I think maybe that's an exaggeration, but I think our attack is very, very, very strong. And I think it's our defence that needs bolstering. Another centre-back, and I think long-term, another right-back. Lamptey has been brilliant in recent weeks. Veltman, excellent, one of my favourite players at the club. I think we need a permanent right-back backup. Obviously, Kadioglu could have been that, but it almost seems like his position might be more on a wing, maybe even at left back. So I think getting a kind of another Veltman in would be really good. But I don't think we're not going to get that. But I think that could change the season. Listen, I think a lot of it's down to just getting some players back. We have been incredibly unlucky again this season with injuries, despite having brought in, a new medical team in the summer. Dr. Fab and his band of merry men. It hasn't seemed to turn the tide. I think Brighton have equally been quite unlucky with injuries, and I'm sure it's something that the club are putting a lot of money and time and research into to quite understanding how that's happening. That it's something that needs addressing in the second half of the season. I think once we get our players back, we will look like a lot better side. You got to think at the start of the season, we were a pretty much perfectly fit squad. I think Milner was out for a little bit. Other than that, it was pretty much full strength at the start of the season. And that's when we were playing well. I think you can attribute it down to injuries. We've spoken about what I want to see in terms of Fabian Hürzeler, but I think once he has a squad back that's perfectly primed and ready to go, I think we look like a very exciting prospect going into next season. So yeah, Norwich on the weekend, and then I think, is it Everton after that? I think Everton, I'm trying to remember. Everton, we've got Chelsea at some point as well, don't we? There's a Man United, of course, on the 19th as well. There's a lot of games in the next kind of month or so, which I think we can win. I think historically we've done well against some of those teams, so it'd be good to see how we get on in those games. And I think hopefully seeing some fringe players against Norwich would be really good. Obviously, many of you might be watching this after the Norwich game, but I'd be hoping to see players like, Rory McConville playing, other players like that. I think maybe he could be an option at centre-half going into the second half of the season. Maybe the Victor Rees deal collapsing could be an opportunity for someone like Rory McConville. So let me know, what do you think about this season so far? Are you optimistic going into the second half of it? Do you think I'm being harsh? I'd love to know generally your thoughts on Hürzeler, because as I said at the top of the video, I've seen quite a lot of negativity around him, and I'd love to know what you think around Fabian Hürzeler. Is he the real deal? Is the jury out for you? Do you think he'll make it beyond this season? Do you think the club will part ways with him at the end of the season? Do you think he's got the chops? What's he got to do to prove it to you? Let me know. I want to hear your passionate thoughts. If you disagree with me, get into it. Let's get stuck into it. And it's been a pleasure doing this again. I will be back much sooner than the last break we've just had between videos. But as always, enjoy the game, enjoy the Norwich game. And if you're going to any away games, enjoy them. If I see you at the Amex, please say hi. It's great to... whenever you guys stop me and want to have a chat, I love it. So as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like or leave a comment or subscribe. It really helps me out more than you know. So thank you so much. I will see you very soon. And as always, up the Albion.